Hello, dear lurkers, and welcome back to the Third Age Babylon 5 podcast. As you can see today, it's once again just Alex and me discussing an episode, but we can promise you that Meike is still among the living and she's still a part of us. She's just not here today. Still, we are today going to discuss an episode. Which one is it again?
It's a Danish Strife. And I guess as usual, we start with a little bit of a synopsis. All right, so there's quite a lot of things happening in this episode, even though it is not one that sticks to my memory all that much. But we start like right in the middle of action with Sinclair's worst nightmare. It's a big negotiation with the Pilot Association, one of the duties that Sheridan has inherited on this station. And things don't really look up from there. Ostensibly, the main plot of the episode is the arrival of a mysterious alien probe, which sets our main characters into a bit of a frenzy trying to answer a big alien questionnaire. But on the other hand, not really many people on the station actually know about all of this happening, even though it is threatening to destroy the place. But it's happening so quickly that honestly everybody else has more personal things going on. For example, Franklin and Garibaldi, who have a little bit of a confrontation about Franklin's more and more apparent habit of taking stims, so we'll have to talk about that. We also have some visitors on the station, among them Nafar, the official replacement of Jakar, so we're still dealing with the fallout of the Narn Centauri War, and we get a little bit of a close-up on how the Narn are dealing with everything right now. And on the other side of that coin, we have Londo dealing with the fallout of his success, I guess, because Vir has been really unhappy on the station for a long time now, and Londo is trying to get rid of him, get a better place for him. We will have to see how we feel about him and his reasoning there. But yeah, I was noting down plot points for this episode, and there's a few in here, more than I expected.
Yes, now that you have summarized the episode, it feels like there's a lot in it, and when I was watching it, I actually didn't feel like it that much. But maybe we should go to first impressions now, I would say. So yeah, like I said, my first impression was kind of empty. Although it's probably not fair, but I mean, it was interesting to watch. It was nice to watch, but in the end, I was kind of asking myself, why did I watch this? Because it was a bit like, I mean, this whole plot with a probe to me kind of feels like it is a Star Trek plot gone lost. It's like a plot from, that could have easily been in Star Trek. And it's interesting and everything, but yeah, it was a bit like that. And then there are a lot of like character plots where I feel like we are building up a story that is not quite there yet. We are building up, we are putting our characters in place for a big reveal at some point. So yeah.
Quite a few supporting sort of scenes in here that build, like you say, on the character stuff that we are already aware of, but we don't really introduce a lot of things. We already talked about this a little bit with Convictions, that there seems to be a trend in the beginning of season 3 that we are tentatively still in the everyday sort of operations of Babylon 5, but it is always tied into these larger plots happening. So I think it still feels a little bit like the calm before the storm. Maybe this is one of the reasons why in the big picture it kind of falls under the table. I think it also doesn't help that next week's episode is going to be a very momentous and memorable one, so this one tends to pale in comparison a little bit. But maybe in this case, let's start with the alien probe and get this sort of A-plot of the story out of the way, because even though it is sort of the focus of the episode, I don't know if personally, I don't think I have all that much to talk about there, because like you say, it feels like it could have been a Star Trek episode. I'm actually pretty certain it has been a Star Trek episode, at least on 2 occasions in the original series, and then later in the next generation as well. This idea of probes that have slightly more advanced technology messing with you and being sort of your first contact situation is well established there.
And also just this idea that there's someone out there in the universe who is testing you, who knows a bit more than you, and who tries to decide whether you're worthy or not. I think we also have that a few times in Stargate, I would say. Maybe not the exact same setup, but kind of similar. So that's just something typically sci-fi. And also just like a classy idea. I mean, I want to say stereotype, but I think the more positive way to put it would be like classy. Just like when we had this little scene on the side about someone accusing an alien of having abducted their grandfather. So alien abduction, probes to test you. I think that's just the typical things that you would expect somewhere out there in space. So yeah, it's maybe not the most original idea, but I think what I find most striking about the plot, and I hope we can just jump there immediately, for me is actually Ivanova's reaction. The Susan's reaction, honestly, it is lovely. It's just like she takes it so literal. She's literally like, oh nice, someone sent out that test and is offering really great technology. Well, great, we are intelligent. What could go wrong? I just love that.
I still can't decide if she's really taking it at face value or is just very sarcastic about it, but either way, she seems to have a great time.
Either way, I love her reaction. Both versions I love.
And she's very much over it immediately. What I do think makes this kind of interesting is that in the context of Babylon 5, it paints us an interesting picture of what space exploration in Babylon 5 is actually like. If we look at this in, Stargate and Star Trek, this is still somewhat out of the ordinary because usually you just come across another ship with a crew that you then talk to, or you come to a planet that is inhabited that you can talk to. That's usually what First Contact over there looks like. And in a lot of science fiction it does. And once again, the Babylon 5 universe seems like the just slightly less optimistic, I don't want to say dystopian, but less optimistic version of this, where the First Contact scenarios we've seen in the show so far have been stumbling across some ruins on Ikara, stumbling across some ruins on Epsilon 3, stumbling across this probe. So really this idea that if you make First Contact in Babylon 5, it's unlikely you just find some friendly people to talk to. You're usually going to find some technological remnant. I mean, we don't even know if the civilization that sent out these probes is still around, or if this is kind of a Ikara situation where, oh yeah, a long time ago, there was a civilization that sent out thousands of these probes, and one of these probes turned around and blew themselves up because they didn't answer their own questions right, or something like that. So I could easily, because big spoiler alert, we don't really hear about the civilization anymore. I don't know if we are to take this as, oh, there is this lurking threat out there, which very well could be true, or if it really is just one of these cases, oh, space is just full of junk and ruins and remnants of old civilizations, and most of them seem to have been quite nasty in the Babylon 5 universe. And it's interesting. I think it every time highlights also that the job of the explorer ships that we saw in season 2 is really quite dangerous, because that's the kind of stuff that they have to deal with.
Yes. Well, I mean, something that we also have to talk about is how we interpret the end of that plot, actually, because I'm still not quite sure, or I don't know if we even know, or if the main characters even know. Did the probe explode? Did the probe really explode because we answered all the questions correctly, as Sheridan suddenly assumed, or did it explode because there was this one question that we did not answer correctly? Or did it explode because we answered all the questions but some were not quite correct?
Yeah, it is. I think this goes along with sort of this portrayal of how space exploration looks. You don't really get to have a definitive answer to this. It's just sort of Sheridan had a hunch and it turned out to be correct. And that's about as well as it goes. I think the one thing that we do get definitively is that it is an evil probe, because the correct, quote unquote, the correct way of not getting blown up by it is just pretending you're dumb, which is interesting.
Oh, I mean, if you don't take the challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like the winning move is not to play, is that kind of thing, which is. I wonder how much, especially back in the 90s, how much this was a thing. But, in current sort of more hard sci-fi discussions, like one of the favorite topics is always the Fermi paradox. Like, why don't we see big civilizations out there? And this idea that there's this culling advanced civilization that just takes out any rival civilization that could be advanced enough is like one of the happily proposed theories out there. So, yeah, this idea of sinister things lurking out there. And I mean, in retrospect, it fits Sheridan very well that he would look at that and his conspiracy mind would start churning, be like, no, this doesn't add up. There is something more behind this going on. And good on him, because he seems to have been completely right this time around.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, what I was also thinking about was that this probe kind of like leaving you alive when you answer all of the questions correctly and then sending super advanced questions. It's also like, I think, an understanding of knowledge and of science that kind of we can reflect on, especially when we think of that as a more of a borrowed Star Trek plot or as a general sci-fi plot that now and then appears. Because I mean, if we think that if we think that it is really like executed honestly, like if we assume that Sheridan wasn't correct, if we assume that it really exploded because we answered a few things incorrectly according to their view, then with all of their advanced stuff that they sent, also this question of could it even ever be solved correctly? Or do you have to be in the mind of this one person programming the probe to answer all the questions correctly? Because the more advanced you get in any subject of study, and that even happens in math, you can discuss about proofs in math for months if you want to. So if you get to a certain level of advancement, nothing is absolutely objective anymore. You can discuss everything, and you have several solutions to come to any goal. Even in the exact sciences, it's even in physics, it gets super worse in physics at some point. So that was what I was thinking. So it also kind of plays with our mind of questioning how absolute is the knowledge that we have.
I mean, it would be super interesting to see what kinds of questions the probe really asked and what sort of the internal logic is. Like, there's definitely this idea, it can't very well be asking specific data, right? We get this entire thing of Franklin getting asked a question about biology, and it's very unlikely that they base this directly on, okay, how well is this civilization suited to cure human diseases? I think it must be more that is kind of from the answers that you give, extrapolates at what level you're kind of at, so that it's less talking about individual theses that are being put forward and more like, okay, are they discussing quantum physics yet, rather than what model of quantum physics are they developing at this point?
Yes.
Which still is like the...
Yeah, I mean, because I was just thinking that it asks kind of like super general things, like it asks you about quantum physics, but in biology it would ask you like how much you understand the big secrets, like that we probably at this point haven't even discovered about the basic components of life. So that you kind of have to, because we have so much life in this universe that is so closely related from the material that they're made of, we actually have civilizations that can compare this level of knowledge because we all were kind of similar. So, yeah.
That's why, I mean, it would be interesting to see,
Yeah.
to dissect the probe and see what it's actually doing, because I think it's very possible we've had a precedent of that it is kind of this infection Ikara situation going on, where they set this ideal of what the correct tech level is, and that backfires. But
I love the idea of a civilization dying because someone couldn't do the math homework. I just love it.
yeah, but I mean, that's obviously all under the assumption that the probe were to be earnest in its proposal, which it isn't, which I find interesting, because I think that is a question that will come up with every other plot as well.
Well, we're not entirely sure if it isn't. We just really don't know, but we can assume that.
I mean, I'm siding with Sheridan on this one, but you can argue that point. But yeah, it is this interesting thing of like, also, is a single multiple choice test about your theoretical understanding of the universe really the best way to assess if a civilization could be a threat to you or not, right? That's also an interesting idea, right? Like, it's having theoretically figured out how to build nuclear bombs doesn't really tell you much about the fact if there's an arsenal then there.
Yes, especially if you can build nuclear weapons, you can also build you can also use it just for producing energy. That is the problem. You don't know what we're using it for.
Yeah, it's but I mean, either way, it seems to have maybe worked for the civilization long enough that the probe is still around, but at the other hand, they aren't a galaxy-conquering threat yet, so it can't be too successful with it either. But yeah, this is it leaves us with more questions than answers at the end of the day.
Which is kind of ironic.
Yeah, it does. It is. And it does feel like something that probably, I would guess, Earth Alliance has encountered more often than not. I would wager the reason that our crew is able to get this many answers correctly in relatively short time is because this sort of interaction is kind of, what's to be expected in the Babylon 5 universe, that you have to jump through hoops, and probably Earth Alliance has gotten better at this since their first encounter with the Minbari as well. They are maybe more more sensible about this now. Should we move on to some of the stuff that is happening while a ticking time bomb is almost blowing up the entire station? Because I like the juxtaposition that we have, like this core team of officers scrambling to save everyone. And it's really just an everyday occurrence because nobody else celebrates or, thanks them for this. This is just them doing their job, whereas everybody else is also doing their job. Maybe sticking relatively close still to our human crew, should we talk about Franklin and his adventures a little bit? Because we get a few scenes with Franklin sort of in medias res across his day, him very tired at the restaurant, trying to dance or wanting to dance and being way too tired for it until he's suddenly not anymore. We get him operating in a very stressful situation. We get him screaming at everybody when he's being asked to also answer this weird alien multiple choice test. So he's been having a great time, only to at the end of the episode declare, "Look at this crisis, I managed just fine."
Yes, let's talk about our favorite doctor.
Sure.
Yeah, where do you want to start?
I mean, that's why I tell you, there's all these different instances. Which one do you want to start with?
What was this adventure that he had on the side of the ticking time bomb?
I just summarized that for you.
Yeah, no, what was he doing, like, actively?
No, we like I said, we go like in medias res always into his day where he's doing something.
Okay, but it didn't have an own plot in this episode.
The plot is that he's addicted to stuff.
Okay, yeah, that's the plot. Okay, because I was just thinking, was there another patient or something?
No, it's really a normal day for him. He goes to a restaurant, he has an operation, he works.
Yeah, so this thing with this addiction is interesting, I think, because I mean, yeah, I think it's interesting because he is a person who knows really all of the details of how these things work, and he knows all of the dangers. And I think that's what makes it so dangerous, because if I think I'm just a lay person who has like a basic understanding of chemistry and biology, I still look at these things like, yeah, okay, I should be careful, they could have side effects, or, And I think as a doctor, when you are in this power position of you can save life, so much more than everyone else, you are the savior in a very disparate situation. And you get this pill or this whatever, I think it's not a pill,
It's like an injection.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
It is just so easily to just be overconfident in using it. And I think that's what we are seeing in him, actually. And also that kind of is a nice contrast to Garibaldi, I think, because we already know that he definitely has an issue with drinking. I think we don't know how bad it is yet, but we know that there is something.
It's been bad enough to destroy his life at least once completely.
Yeah. So it's definitely there, and it is bad. And he just gives advice to a friend as a normal, kind of grounded person, saying using any kind of substance that changes you in this and that way is just dangerous in general. And if you're doing it to keep functioning, it's never good. You have to function without. This is dangerous. Just like the reasonable, normal person advice. But, you're talking to someone who thinks, okay, but I'm in a position of power because I know so much more. And that is an interesting contrast there, I would say.
Especially because you have the situation, and that's like even unrelated to addiction, an issue that somebody like Franklin can have. Somebody who is very competent and whose entire competency is focused on finding solutions. And if he is confronted with something like the first thing Garibaldi points out is just this very I don't need to be an expert to tell you were at this bar. You were absolutely vibed after working for 20 hours. You go to the bathroom and you come back extremely hyped and thrilled to dance. That's not normal. Something is off here. And for Franklin, all this is a puzzle of, okay, this is an observation. Let me explain to you why this is actually completely normal. And that is something that he's extremely good at. And because of this, this skill of his turns into a defense mechanism where there's really not a lot that Garibaldi can do about that. If you were just set on justifying something to yourself, that's something we humans are generally extremely good at, you will find reasons for absolutely anything. People are extremely good at reconciling the most crazy shit. And I wonder, throughout this entire episode, how much Garibaldi buys into anything that Franklin is saying, and how much it is him just recognizing, oh yeah, I had so many excuses to take a drink that were all very good reasons that nobody could take away from me. I can't talk against that. Like, if I talk against that, whenever I talk against it, you just get extremely defensive. It becomes even harder for me to reach out to you. So there is no avenue for me to really help here at this point in time.
Yeah, I think Garibaldi definitely understands what is going on there. So yeah, I mean, maybe let's also jump to the moment where Franklin is confronted with the ticking time bomb. Like, does he actually take that risk seriously at all? I didn't see that.
I mean, the question is, what would taking this risk seriously look like?
Not yelling at the person coming into the sick bay, asking him to answer the question, being like, I'm busy, I have super important things to do, I'm the doctor.
I mean, yeah, but he also yells at the person that's not giving him the answer straight up. He's just yelling at everybody. I think he is really just in this mode. I am always being asked to do more things. And, whether it's people asking him to just save yet another life or just save 2,500,000 lives because there is a bomb ticking around the station. Like, he doesn't even have, I don't think, enough time to process the whole situation with the probe. I think for him, it's just, for some reason, Command is now asking me to answer a bunch of weird questions that I honestly don't have the time or qualifications for. It's just he's being asked to do more and more things, and these all just blend and bleed into each other because it's this endless stream of impossible tasks. So honestly, why the hell not an even more impossible task in this alien quiz? What's interesting for me is, I think, just as this portrayal of the effects of stims or their withdrawal, is that it's not going and I think there's good reason we're using stims here, not exploring Garibaldi's drinking problem more, because with stims you're really allowed to not fall into the stereotypical, he's drunk, that means he gets into a bar fight and then passes out, because that is our TV shorthand of what being a drunk is like. No, here this is just Franklin, and honestly, if I hadn't known about, him using stims before in other episodes as well, I could also write all of this off as just being normal Franklin, because we've seen him being frustrated and we've seen him being yelling at other people just because he's stressed, just because he's overworked. So it also showcases the insidiousness of, it's not that easy to catch this, because there are just many other reasons and many other explanations you can give for his behavior. So take somebody like Garibaldi, who spends a lot of time with him, to really see the discrepancies here, to put together that, oh no, this is bad on an even other level. And it gets to also this point, and I think it speaks to their friendship that we haven't gotten to this point yet, but it ultimately would probably also lead to this discussion of Franklin asking, okay, I take stims, so what else do you want me to do? Not do my job? Not give the answers to the probe that will blow us all up? Then he has this complex of having to be the savior all on his own, and it keeps getting reinforced because he is necessary to resolve a lot of these things.
I mean, the Franklin plot was one of these plots where I felt like, okay, so now we're being introduced to this problem, or I think again introduced, or stronger introduced. It's just being put to our attention again. Because I felt like, okay, something else is coming later. It's like, this is something that is going on constantly in the back. Like, whenever I have a more quiet conversation in command or on the bridge or whatever in the command room, that is going on in the back, like, constantly every day. So it's an ongoing drama that is probably going to lead somewhere at some point.
I think it speaks to this entire feeling of early season 3, where we are in the normal everyday. Franklin has just a normal work day, but it's not status quo. It keeps getting worse. And this is a reminder we're getting here that this is not sustainable. And this speaks very much to, what life on the station overall is right now. Like, yeah, sure, the situation, like the Centauri have taken over the Narn homeworld. So I guess that war is over now. but it's not a sustainable status quo. It keeps getting worse, even now that the fighting is over to the large degree. And this is how it's all sort of turning out. The situation, even with the Pilots Association, keeps getting worse because probably Earth Alliance keeps cutting funding and stuff like that. Things are just running as normal, but under the hood, everything keeps getting worse.
That's good. That's good. That we have to keep that. Things run as normal, but
It's one of these points where you look at this show and 30 years later you think, that seems familiar somehow. It's a very classic feeling, very different to the Star Trek comparison that we had. Usually that's not the case.
so maybe let's continue to the Jakar plot.
Yes, we have a big visitor, Nafar, who comes in, and I am so curious how we deal with him. He is supposed to be the official replacement for Jakar, and he recaps a lot of what we already know. The non-homo has obviously fallen. The entire culture and nation and administration of the Narn has been completely dismantled, and Jakar is the last holdover from this. He's the last member of the Kari, the ruling body of the Narn, that has not been apprehended and, by all accounts, killed. Because he's on Sanctuary on Babylon 5, but as citizen Jakar, he doesn't hold any official authority anymore. So the question is, ostensibly, of course, the idea that the Centauri want an official representative on the station is legally to be expected, but it's obviously also kind of a power move that is happening here. They want to remove Jakar as a sort of symbol and potential leader for any sort of resistance, and they use Nafar to do so. So what do we think about Nafar?
I mean, the tragic aspect about his character to me actually is that he has an argumentation, like he literally makes a point. I think when you look at conflict that we have going on nowadays, you also have these argumentations that go for an alliance with the enemy, for giving up ideals or giving up your identity in the face of the absolute horrors that come with war. And I'm not even saying that it is morally completely wrong that at some point you have to think of, okay, is this fight worth all of these starving people, all of this destruction? I think it is a discussion that at some point you have to have, but I think it's also always extremely painful when you have this discussion of now we have been brought to our knees by hunger and by disease and by all of these humanitarian disasters, that that evil can just give us a deal and we think about it. And I think that is his personification. To me, he is in person someone who looks at Ukraine and says, like, yeah, it's kind of bad that these houses were bombed. Maybe we should be friends with Russia. I think that is him in person. And the interesting thing, of course, is that he comes from the attacked group himself. But also that is not really a problem or not really a conflict, because I think you can easily come to this conclusion. But I think it is still tragic, because this is how oppression and how fascism in the end and kind of find their foothold in us.
Okay. I'm curious because I'm looking at Nafar, and there is a very central question for me about him, and I wonder how that falls with your sort of view of the character, because you've drawn very strong parallels to nowadays immediately. The big question, and this is why I mentioned this with the probe also, the big question for me about Nafar is, how earnest is he when he talks? And he does this multiple times with Jakar, when he talks about this idea that we must resist, but later. Right? This idea, like, right now we've just been bombed, everything is gone down the drain. Right now the Centauri are just left and right mass executing people everywhere. So everything we do just causes so much chaos that we can't form a resistance. And we should do that later. Because for me, there's two ways to look at that. One is this is just a talking point to get Jakar to just get on that shuttle and come back home. Like, Nafar says, oh, I've been assured by all my contacts that you'll be treated fairly and safely, and you definitely won't be killed as soon as you step foot on the Hanan homeworld, which, does he actually believe that at any second? I don't think so. But there is this question, like, is he just a collaborator who at the first opportunity says, here is a position of power that I can take in this new order, so I'm willing to sell out everything? Or is he somebody who is genuinely saying, yes, we must resist, but at a different point in time? Because for me, these are two different beasts of discussion to have.
Totally. And I don't know. I mean, I definitely didn't see him as, never actually saw him as someone just wanting to take a position of power. So the first option for me actually is kind of out, because I didn't see that in him at all. But what I see in him is this tragic pragmatism that comes at some point when you see the things that he has seen. And I think it's dangerous to at some point be like, okay, this caused a lot of suffering, so let's cooperate with the evil, because I think that's a dangerous step. But I think that he actually does it. He's earnest about it, I would say. But it's a pragmatism that I, in these situations, in these conflicts, find extremely dangerous.
I mean, it certainly is, because the question, if we do assume he is earnest in this, the question we have to ask is, when is it a better time to resist, right? Like, at what are your criteria?
Yeah, we could also ask a question. Okay, so if the Narn now completely stop resisting, do the Centauri buy that, or do they think that the resistance is just better hidden and continue killing people? So would that actually help anyone if the Narn now stop fighting for themselves? Would that save lives? I would say no.
I mean, yeah, that's, but I mean, then it's getting really theoretical, right? Like,
No, I don't think it's
I-
theoretical. I think that's how you have to view these wars and these conflicts. Before you give up fighting for your right to live, you have to consider these possibilities.
I mean, that is true, but then I am like really asking myself, in the case of Nafar, is like, this is what I mean. Is he earnest or not? Like, is he talking about giving up fighting, or is he talking about a different kind of fighting against that, right? There is this question of, is what Jakar is doing right now effective, the most or only effective way to resist, or are there other ways of doing that? Which is very difficult, because if you're looking historically at, an armed resistance against a colonizer or invader, for one, they're not usually crowned with a lot of achievement at the end of the day, not without outside help, which is something Jakar has not been effective at getting, really, up to this point. So there is like, and I mean, yeah, that this is a difficult question. Like, what are you supposed to do? Are you waiting for the next Dalai Lama on Narn? Like, because there is generally this idea, well, when it comes to decolonizing, peaceful resistance movement have been at points more successful than armed ones. So should we be advocating for that now? Or is that also already giving up the fight? And this is where I'm just really unsure where Nafar falls. I am, like you, convinced that he isn't a completely willful collaborator, at least not in the eyes of the Centauri. Londo says as much. But yeah, for me, there's really this question: what is it that he's advocating for? Is he giving up the fight? Is he postponing the fight? Is he just trying to find another way to do this fight? Which I don't know if we have enough information to resolve this. It's just what I get hung up on with this character at all.
I mean, we definitely don't have enough information to resolve it. But I think that we have enough information to say that I think it is dangerous in such a situation to be weakened by voices like his. Because, I mean, we always just have to remember that the whole Narn identity and the whole Narn culture is basically still defending their right to exist. So just like the basic right, should we exist or should we be genocided? Like, that is what we are fighting for. And then to just be weakened from the inside by someone who's like, hey, maybe they stop killing our people if we don't do this and that, is the worst.
And I mean, this what I'm interested. I have been like pondering this a little bit. Like, because we have so little information, like what points would Nafar make? And there is this idea, well, the Narn have already, like, Nafar is probably old enough to have seen what the last successful armed resistance against the Centauri looked like. And I could imagine there is like this part of the Narn who say, well, that because of that, we were left without our original culture, with a whole bunch of deaths. So what really did we manage to preserve there even? And it is an extremely cynical, nihilistic view of viewing that, but I can imagine that on the non-homeworld that is more than just Nafar having that position, that has some appeal. Maybe that is also why they sent him to Babylon 5 and why it doesn't work on Babylon 5, because there you have less support for that kind of position.
For me, it's just not as nuanced. Like this standing that he has is just so evil and so bad. For me, there aren't these nuances, honestly.
We do have a second visitor on the station who is Talon, the bodyguard, who is an acquaintance of Sheridan's because they met on board the alien ship that abducted both of them. And he comes on board with Nafar as Nafar's bodyguard. And I wonder why.
Why not? Why is that such a big question?
Well, because you just explained how evil Nafar is.
No, I mean, like I said, these standings are not rare. You can find them anywhere. But I just have to always step back from them, and I don't see them as nuanced as you do. I just see them as a big threat to the big goal in the end.
It's just I'm just pointing it out because it's interesting, because Talon is such a staunch supporter of Jakar in the end, right? Like, he stands up for him. He clearly is on the side we should resist now. And it is a question to me, how did he end up with Nafar? Like, just within the episode, outside even of our discussion. And I wonder, like, did he just see the opportunity to go to Babylon 5? Does he see some potential in Nafar to be useful to resistance, even the kind that Jakar is trying to build up? Because...
Or is he just empathetic and compassionate towards a Narn having a mission in this dire situation? Like, you can definitely help someone who is coming from a war zone, who is a refugee or whatever, although you don't completely agree with their goals.
I mean, yeah, but, you know, depending on how you interpret Nafar, that is a difficult thing. Like, if you view him as somebody who does something fundamentally evil or is collaborating, that's different than helping somebody who's just coming from a war zone, right?
Yes, but I don't think it has to exclude itself completely.
Which just speaks probably to the fact that Talon has an interesting, perhaps nuanced view on this. I don't know.
Like, I mean, I said that he did something fundamental evil because in such conflicts, which I deal with a lot when when you study history, when you especially study the history in Central and Eastern Europe, which has been kind of a focus of myself for a while, you have these conflicts a lot, and these standpoints are dangerous and are a threat. But that doesn't mean that necessarily there's not a way out. Like, you wouldn't help someone like Nathar when you meet him on a transport or whatever. I just really think that this standpoint is something that should not become too strong, because it is such a big threat to the big goal in the end of not falling victim to genocide. That's what's under threat there. But still, I also understand how people end up there, because when you see enough suffering, you also become kind of pragmatic and feel like you're completely honest and just offering a solution, you know? So I can also see that a bit apart of, I see the person and take that seriously, and I still hate their standing very, very much.
So then let's talk less about Nafar as the person and what he does for Jakar on the station, because ostensibly he is a threat. He is trying to come in and replace Jakar, but at the end of the day, this whole thing, I think, is a very positive outcome for Jakar, because we've seen in the past that Jakar consistently had some trouble fulfilling his role as leader of the Narn on this station. We had his authority questioned. We had him struggling providing the sort of religious and spiritual leadership that was expected for him. Going as far back as season 1, we had to provide this special flower to go through a ceremony. At this point, also his attaché is missing in action out there, so he's lost like his staff. So I think it's good f- on this end that we get somebody who galvanizes the Nar on the station as much as Nafar does, and really gives him this confirmation. Because of all the points that Nafar makes, I think the strongest one really is this idea that all the Nar on the station are making a decision not just for themselves, but for their whole entire family. Like everyone of theirs that is back home has no say in that matter and will just be sacrificed more or less on that. And that is, from what I've seen of Jakar being the leader on Babylon 5, something he would have had difficulty asking just on his own. So that he gets this affirmation now, more or less thanks to Nafar, is probably like one of the biggest takeaways we have from this episode. And I think it's nice that we get such a moving scene for it too, that just takes place with the Narn.
Yes. I mean, in a way, it is a favor that you can do to such a kind of leader like Jakar kind of is at the moment, is a moment to prove himself. And that's kind of what he is delivered there. Because if you want to be in this position, you have to be able to prove yourself, and you have to be able to overcome these challenges and to gain support of people. And he is capable of and is achieving that in the end.
Would you? It's interesting that you describe this as him proving himself. How do you? What's that proving thing for you? I'm just asking because for me in this episode, he feels very passive. Where
He is very passive, but in the end, all of the work that he has been doing and all of the argumentation that he can provide in the end convinces more people.
Okay, yeah. So it's less that inside of this episode we get a lot from him, but it's more all the times he has struggled for leadership that actually did something. He actually achieved something. Right? Okay, yeah, I can get that. With the Nafar and Jakar, there's one interaction that I would still like to highlight, and that is Garibaldi coming to Jakar. Garibaldi kind of has he's probably the most positive character of this episode, because he keeps going around to different people and providing support to them. He's dealing with Franklin, and then also hears, Jakar is planning to leave Sanctuary on the station, and of all the human people, including Sheridan, who granted that Sanctuary, it is Garibaldi who comes in and talks to him about it.
Yeah. Is that so? What's so special about that for you?
I mean, we spent the entire first season mainly with Garibaldi trying to deal with Shikara as a villain and trying to deal with this. Like, we had this entire dynamic for the first, I would say, the better part of the second season, that we have Londo being in the casino doing his thing, and Garibaldi sort of encountering him there more often than not and being kind of amused by this and having some words with him, maybe sharing a non-drink, like a glass of water and a drink, and, kind of shrugging it off, even if you have to pay for it. And now, I don't think Garibaldi could be bothered with Londo at all anymore, and it's been flipped over. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Garibaldi gravitated towards the arch nemesis of Londo in this instance.
Yeah, I think all of the things that have been happening and all of the attacks and everything that happened in the meantime just really kind of turned around the opinion of a lot of people. And maybe once again, Garibaldi is this stand-in of the normal, nice working guy who saw what the Centauri did and kind of changed his mind and kind of really had an experience that kind of switched something over in his head. I think he just is in the conversation that we had with Franklin in the beginning of the episode. He's the stand-in for normal, nice guy.
Maybe the thing that's, like, for me makes this maybe something that I think about or want to think about, I want to justify it more, is this fact that, Garibaldi is our everyday man. Garibaldi is the guy who uses peekaboo as his security password on the security station, right? Of course, I don't expect him to stay friends with Londo when Londo turns into war criminal. Sure. But I still I'm still surprised to see then that push from not just being no longer friends with Londo to actively seeking out Jakar, because Jakar has a lot of great qualities, but for me as a viewer, these qualities are, him giving a very verbose speech about the ant on his hand and the ant not realizing the scope of the station around it when he's talking to is it Catherine, Sinclair's girlfriend?
I think so.
But when I think about what are the positive and great sides about Jakar, I think about this almost warrior poet kind of character who is very honorable and thinking about the big stuff in the universe. And Garibaldi as the everyday character doesn't strike me as the guy who would necessarily appreciate that a lot. He strikes me as the guy who wants to sit in his flat and wants to eat popcorn while watching Daffy Duck. So the fact that these two find to each other is interesting to me, because I think the gap there is just a bit bigger between him and Jakar and him and Londo, because with him and Londo it feels like there's a lot more natural overlap, at least in my book a little bit. We mentioned Talon very briefly. Do we want to talk about Talon and Sheridan's little interaction there?
Okay. Walk me through it.
They do have just the one interaction. It is them at the bar talking about, oh well, where have you been? How wondrous that we come across here. Talon talks a little bit about spending most of the time in hospital after the bombings, and gives sort of this idea that he feels the sort of connection with Sheridan now, and if he were to sign on as Sheridan's bodyguard, Sheridan would live for about 150 years, as kind of this idea of, oh, he wants to repay that sort of debt that he feels there is now.
Yes, I remember. I mean, to the viewers, if I'm a little out of tune today, I only slept 2 hours last night, which is not totally abnormal for me, but it takes a toll. I remember now. But I don't know how much. I mean, what would you have to say about that? What is so remarkable about that for you?
I think for me it's interesting because we've never really spent a lot of time with a normal Narn. Most of the Narn we see are very high-ranking members or assassins or just as temperamental as Natofa, which doesn't really tell me a lot about normal people. And this Talon, to me, seems like a very normal person. He is kind of this embodiment of what Narn culture has become because of the Centauri. It is kind of warrior people who are very concerned about honor, who carry a sword around with them and talk about blood oaths and that kind of stuff. And in that point, I just find it interesting because similarly to the probe, this is obviously a trope in science fiction. We have a lot of those. We have Klingons, we have Jafar, we have, all of these very honorable, very fighting people. And it still feels a lot different to me just because there is not even that much care given into world building a lot with these guys. It's actually all very simplistic, but at the same time, it feels like we have this established thing, like, yeah, the Narn are the warrior people of this universe, but they're never really treated as such. Like, nobody is talking, Sheridan is never talking about, oh, the Narn with their venerable blood wine and warrior culture, and we need to keep that in mind when we deal with them. How you'd see on a lot of other shows. Here it's just, yeah, this is their identity, but we really treat them as a more complete society. It's not their one gimmick, and that I like.
Yeah. I mean, I just tried to recapitulate this scene, and I think maybe it's not so surprising when you have in the end what is happening later in the show, because we see a lot more Narn characters, and as the show continues, we see a lot more characters that are not exactly totally similar to the culture that they come from or how we got to know this culture. So maybe that's why it doesn't surprise me as much. But yeah.
I mean, for me, it's really this thing of choosing to have this kind of culture, but then deliberately pulling back from putting it front and center. That's really interesting to me. And what strikes me about Talon is that he carries around this katana, which is not an alien blade. We've seen alien blades before, but this is just a katana. He's just resembling a samurai, and his name is literally Talon, as in the Talon, which is like a very fitting warrior name. And I think with Valon 5, we see how much care they can put into props and into sets and into coming up with invented names for things. So this idea that for this guy they choose like very obvious beat you over the head with it warrior iconography, it is doing a lot of heavy lifting of showcasing, yeah, this is a warrior culture, you get that, but it's not the focus of anything. So we will not spend the time of developing a whole big shebang about, them carrying around the Babylon 5 equivalent of a bat'leth or something like that. And I find that just kind of interesting in the treatment of this kind of culture, because it seems to be taking it a bit more seriously than just the gimmick of, oh, these are the warrior people. And yeah, this is the most time we spend with Talon, so this is the first time this has really become apparent for me in this show. But we can move away from the Narn side of things and briefly look at the Centauri and, importantly, the Centauri and Minbari side of things.
Yeah, where do we start? I mean, what exactly, and you have to help me through this again, what exactly is the reason why Londo began to talk to Dylan in the first place?
He wants to get rid of Vir. Like, this is...
Like, that is his motivation.
That is his
Yeah.
motivation. He probably had like a different reason to schedule the appointment, but no, this is what he wants. He has like this idea that he can get a favor from her from way back when, and this is what he's using his favor on. And I mean, we can talk. Tell me what you're more interested in. We can talk about how Dylan deals with all of this, because I think this is a demeanor from Dylan that we haven't seen before. But then there's also a big question here, once again, how earnest is Londo being? What's his actual motivations here?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked the moment when Dylan reacted to Londo's request, and at some point she just looked at him super thoughtful and said, like, super calm, yes, maybe the mission has been abandoned for too long, but it wasn't just like this positive thing of, hey, let's keep this doing again, let's revive this. It was just like, oh god, yes, we don't get along, we have to do something about that, I don't understand you.
It very much feels like the Minbari were like, oh, thank God, they have forgotten about the mission they have on our homeworld. We don't have to deal with them anymore. And now Londo has brought it back up again. So, damn it, we have to do our duty again. Yeah, it's an interesting element to that. I also really like that she very clearly rebuffs him and tells him, like, no, we did never talk about anything, ever. We are not friends. I don't know why you are here.
I mean, we should make a list at some point of how many people on the station had to tell London, no, we're not friends.
I would imagine every single visitor to the casino ever. And also that they don't want to lend him money, because I feel like that is also a recurring theme. So there is definitely this thing of like Dylan is as distant from Londo as she can get, while still honoring his request. And that is also something I wonder about, because I look at Vir and I see a beautiful little teddy bear that I want, of course, to protect, because he has very good morals and he's a great guy. I don't know how much of that Dylan sees. Like, after the little meetups Vir and Lanier have, does Lanier ever go back home and tell Dylan, oh, he's actually kind of a good guy? Or does she really view Vir just as an accessory to the things that Londo has done? Because that's difficult. It's nice to...
Yes, I mean, it is interesting. She probably doesn't know him very well, so she probably has no motivation to take him on. She doesn't know anything about him, but I also think that this is just such a nice opportunity for both of them to be totally surprised by each other, which is just wonderful. I think that a lot of these interactions on in between species on Babylon 5 are really just full of surprises of hey, someone is completely different than their culture, because hey, culture doesn't equal our biology at all. So yeah, it's wonderful. And so, well, let's say for the Minbari it is going to be wonderful to have Vir. They might not know it yet, but I think we have to dissect Londo's motivation a little bit.
And I think that's a good segue there, because honestly, for me, this is an open question. If Dylan knew Vir really well, if she knew just about the moral integrity of Vir and how much he wants to do to help, would she even want to take him in on Minbar, because I think for Delenn there could very easily be the calculation, well, Vera's great. It would be great to have him on Minbar, but that also means Vir has been this positive influence on Londo this entire time, and Londo was this bad. So how much worse is Londo going to get if I take this one positive influence away from him now? I do wonder if at least part of her, maybe season 1 Delenn's part, a little bit more ruthless satire Delenn, would be like, well, this is going to be really bad for Vir, but honestly, it's probably better for everyone if he stays on the station and has to deal with Londo, because it tones Londo down a little bit.
Yes, but also maybe now that the Centauri are at war and now that there's politically so much going on, maybe she could also think that it could be very have a lot of value for the rest of the galaxy if we have a Centauri that was taken out of that context and was protected a little bit of being dragged into all of this Centauri politics.
The only concern I have there, I wonder if the Minbari of Delenn concern themselves enough to learn enough about the Centauri to really take full advantage of that. I think that is something where I think Lanier could have really shone, because he seems like somebody who's insanely interested in other people's cultures. And I think it could be interesting to see a scene of Delenn and Lanier talking about Vir and talking about how useful that would be.
But do you actually have to know so much about Centauri culture, or is it enough to look at someone like Vir, who is still kind of young, kind of nice? I don't want him to commit war crimes as well in a few years.
I mean, yeah, of course, that is something that you can say, but if you know more about Centauri culture, then you can also be like, oh, and honestly, if we do this, we can get can get Vera's entire house into a bigger position. You can start like
Yeah,
not thinking.
yeah.
You can start do the conniving thing and think about Centauri politics, which I wouldn't be surprised if Delenn doesn't want to do. But I could see somebody like Lanier really getting into this and like really being convinced, oh, this is an avenue for us to help. And I mean, also, I would want to see Vir like powered with all the resources the Minbari give him to undercovertly like undermine Londo at every turn. That would be very interesting. But yeah, you already mentioned it. We should really talk about Londo, and for him, there I have the same question. Like, is this Londo trying to quiet his conscience a little bit? Like, does he feel like Vir at every point is this sort of nagging voice that keeps reminding him of another time, of another choice he could have made?
I don't know if I would put it that way, to be honest.
Okay.
I don't know how much connection from Vir himself he's actually making, because I don't know if I would ever picture Londo in young, any similar to Vir. I don't. That's how it works.
I imagine young Londo was like a swashbuckling adventurer who went on like crazy piloting trips and fencing clubs.
Yes, I think he fully indulged in everything, and I think Vir is not the type for that. But I could actually imagine it to be a very honest move from Londo to think, okay, Vir has to get away from this. To really just think that he needs to get into another position so that Mr. Morton is never gonna visit him, that he's never going to be dragged into this.
Maybe. I am like now thinking about this. I don't think Vir is like Londo was as a youth at all. I still wonder if Londo looks at Vir and sort of tells himself that he reminds himself of young. Because I don't think, I think Londo doesn't view himself as somebody who, grew up with a silver spoon and sort of indulged in all this privilege. I think he believes, or he wants to believe, that, oh yeah, back then the world was just that much better and I was just this bright-eyed individual, and then circumstances forced me to become as monstrous as I am now, and I need to protect Vir from that. So I could see there's like layers to a little bit of projection that Londo is doing here.
But I think the motivation to save Vir is probably very honest.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm probably on board with that. This idea of poor little Veer needs to be in a safe place. And these strange space hippies, I don't like them, but Veer probably would really enjoy them. Like the idea that Londo looks at where can I put Veer, he couldn't have picked a more perfect place than Minbar on this. And we will probably come back to this topic when Veer visits the station again and brings some of his reports from to Londo, because I think it's interesting to see how Londo reacts then to this, because ultimately it is him who puts Veer there. And at least right now, having watched this episode, I can't imagine that Londo expected anything other than what he ultimately gets from Veer back there. Of course, Veer would come back wearing a little kimono from the Minbari and be super happy about everything he saw. I think that was to be expected. I think those are the big points we mentioned in the beginning.
Yes. I mean, for a kind of empty episode, these were a lot of points. Honestly, I'm happy we've covered all the points, because 2 hours of sleep is never a good idea.
Well, you should sleep more then.
Should sleep more, yes. Sorry. No, but I think, it was a surprising, interesting episode, definitely. And I think we also filled the time well. So it's time for the outro.
Yes.
So today I actually thought about a question our viewers could answer us if they wanted to, because we are also in the process of reviving our social media accounts. As depending on when we upload this, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't happen yet, but we are in the process of doing so. So my question is, do we have a lot of viewers who would like to see us on Blue Sky? Like, I don't know, you can write that in the comments, because is Twitter really, or is X really still the best choice, or do you enjoy Blue Sky a lot? Just let us know, because we can definitely set that up. Just write it in the comments, we will think about it. So, but until then, we are going to revive our social media channels so that you can find us on Facebook again. You can find us on Instagram and on X and even on Mastodon. Actually posted something on Mastodon recently, so yay. So we are Third Age Podcast everywhere, and you can also find us everywhere where there are podcasts, but most importantly, you can find us on YouTube, because here we are the cutest. Here you can see us.
Very well.